so these days, doesn't it? When you hear people being interviewed, they always start with so. And I have to start with so. So here's my news I want to share with you. I don't know how to say this really. Well, it's not difficult. I went to see my doctor just before Christmas for a flu jab. I'd heard it was going to be a bit bad this year and thought maybe a flu jab would be a good idea. Keep me in circulation. I had things to do, you know. So I went to see my doctor, Tony. He was at my school, a year or two above me, but I've known him and he's been my doctor for many, many years. And he said, well, let's have a general checkup, you know, an MOT, and see if everything's all right. I have one of these every year, nothing to worry about. So he, you know, aside from the flu jab, I had my, you know, blood taken and urine and, you know, blood pressure and pulse and tapping here and tapping there, say RSA 99, you know, the general procedure. Didn't think much more of it, really. Then next day, he called me up and he said, I'm a little worried about your PSA levels. Now, I don't know if you know what PSA levels are. I hope you do. If you're a man, you certainly should do. It stands for prostate-specific antigen. And these are things that the prostate give out if it's under attack from some sort of tumour. And you're supposed to get them checked every year, you know, and I think a normal level is anything under 4 nanograms per milliliter. And mine was 4.97, nearly 5. Well, so not very high, to be perfectly honest. Someone of 10 years older than me would expect 5 as a sort of mean level of PSA. So really I wasn't too concerned. But Tony said, maybe you should consider an MRI. It seemed to be taking a bit of a sledgehammer to a peanut, but I said, okay, you know, just to keep him happy, and I was supposed to keep myself happy as well. So I went into one of those MRI imaging suites, or whatever you call them, you know, a great big ring, and you get put on a flatbed and sort of ease through until this ring is around you, and then it fires these magnetic beams, you know, tung, 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 tung. Do you remember Regan in The Exorcist, the poor little girl, Regan McNeil, being examined for, well, I was being examined not for anything as beastly as Satan, but something as beastly, and it was in the prostate that they were looking. Now, what is a prostate? You may well wonder, and I'm still not that certain myself. It's not an organ so much as a gland, I believe, and it sits between a man, because only men have them, a man's bladder and his old fella, his todger, I suppose, and it has a tube going through it from the bladder, and that eventually ends up in the urethra, and it does something to make the sperm more fluid once it hits its target, I suppose. I don't know, it makes it less viscous. Oh, goodness knows. Anyway, it's a very important chap for men to have, and it does often go wrong. It gets enlarged and makes peeing difficult or too easy or something, and of course it is an absolutely prone bugger for cancer. Anyway, I've said the C word first off now. So, where were we? Yes, I had the MRI. Again, went home, didn't really think much more of it. Then the next day, Tony calls again, and then he says, oh, Stephen, something rather mischievous showed up. Good word, Tony, mischievous. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you know, maybe you should go and see a specialist now. So he sent me to a fellow called Roger, who was a professor of urology, a very famous chap in his field, I believe. And Roger had looked at the MRI image, and he suggested a biopsy. Oh dear, how on earth do you get live at a prostate? You know, I think, go up, it's either one tube or up the other. Well, anyway, it's all very personal and undignified, this story, so I might as well bite the bullet and come clean with you. It was a transrectal biopsy, so some sort of thing went up and took a clip of living tissue from the prostate. It's not an experience I'd recommend to my worst enemy. Really very unpleasant feeling. It's like taking an ice core, you know, in the poles. Anyway, they took these 2 bits out of me, just to be sure. Again, another wait, and then I get the results the next day. And yes, indeed, there is a cancer there. A carcinoma, an adenocarcinoma is the correct word, I believe. And these things are graded. There's a particular grading system for prostate cancer. It's called the Gleason score. And my score was 8, it seemed. We'll come to that a bit later, but that's high enough to warrant some sort of treatment. And the next stage was just to make assurance doubly sure, as Lady Macbeth puts it, or is it Macbeth? One of them, and have a PET scan. One of these things where they inject you with some sort of radioactive material, gallium arsenide in this instance, I think, or just gallium, not the arsenide. No, I'm thinking of something else there. They inject you with gallium and then it sends around the system, and any bit that's in any way cancerous is lit up, shows avidity, I think is the technical term. So, I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but anyway, I'll get to the chase. Again, that gets done, and I come back, and another night of waiting, and the next day, yes, indeed, there it is. Doesn't seem to have spread, the cancer, because what you don't want cancer to do is to spread from one area to another. Metastasis, they call it. You don't want it to metastasize, to spread its cells, to send them all over the place, because then you've got a heck of a job dealing with it. There didn't seem to be metastasis, but one of the lymph nodes, they surround the lymph nodes, surround the prostate like a sort of necklace, and one of them had something which called for active surveillance, according to the radiologist who looked at the image. And so I went again to see Roger, the urologist, and he looked at the PET scan, and he looked at the MRI scan and the biopsy results, and we had a couple of options. One was radiotherapy, but that's a very long and difficult process. It's fine for some people, but there were a number of issues with it for me. I won't go into the full details of it because you have to weigh these things up. And the other was to get rid of the prostate, to get it out using a process known as radical laparoscopic prostatectomy, robotic, no less, radical robotic laparoscopic prostatectomy. In other words, sending little robots in through tiny holes that are pierced in your tummy. And that's what the operation we decided on should be, because he also wanted to take out some of the lymph nodes, just in case there was a spread there. So where are we now? Well, we're in December, and it's nearly Christmas. So an operation is decided on. And in the first week of January, I had the operation. I've cut to the chase. And it all seemed to go pretty well. They took the prostate out. They took out 11 lymph nodes. The various bits that were taken out were then examined, and it was discovered, in fact, that I had a Gleason score of 9, not of 8. And considering 10 is the maximum, this was clearly rather an aggressive little bugger. So, what next? Well, you have to recover, and that's what I've been doing. In case you've been wondering why I've been out of the public eye, I'm sure you haven't. But I have been keeping my head down as much as possible, because obviously you want to get better without strangers with the best intent in the world sending you all kinds of cards and flowers and letters, because you have to answer them all, and I wasn't quite up to that. It's a bit of a business having an operation like that. It's like there are 5 holes punctured in you, so it's like being stabbed 5 times. Admittedly, you're asleep, and it's all very antiseptic and hygienic and so on, and like a stabbing in the street. But to the body, it's the same. It's the same rather traumatic effect, and you think you're going to recover really well, but it takes longer than it might, and it's all pretty undignified and unfortunate. So my family and my divine and darling husband, of course, were just marvellous, and those few friends that have known have been very discreet and kind about it. Because cancer, in the end, that's a word that just rings in your head. Cancer, I've got cancer. I went around saying to myself, I've got cancer. Good heavens, Stephen, you're not the sort of person who gets cancer. I mean, I know it's an old cliche, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. Cancer is something that happens to other people. You're probably now looking into my eyes and seeing, oh yes, I can see he's the kind of cancer-y person. I can see that now. That's how one looks at people who've got cancer. You almost wonder, is there a particular smell, a particular aura they give off of their cancer? What a horrible word it is. It's one of our real taboo words, isn't it? I knew an old woman who couldn't even say it. She couldn't say death or killed or died or any of those words, or cancer. She once described someone as having because it's a sort of thing, if you have Tourette's, you might say cancer a lot. It's just one of those shocking, hard, difficult words. And so far as we know, it's all been got. Are there greater chances of me getting other kinds of cancer now? Apparently not. If you get prostate cancer, you don't necessarily find yourself more susceptible to other kinds. But I won't know for sure until my PSA levels are checked, and they should be 0 now because I have no prostate. So the prostate-specific antigen, the PSA level, should be 0. But if there is anything left on the bed of the prostate where they've taken it out, then maybe that will spread, and I'll need radiotherapy, and the whole damn thing will start again. But for the moment, I'm fit and well and happy, and I just wanted to let you know, because rumours had started to swirl, you know, goodness knows, you know, I'm not the most important person in the world, but if you are ever on television and do things in the public eye, people naturally seem to exhibit great interest, and a newspaper had called up, and I thought, well, before the gossip gets silly and ill-informed, I might as well come clean. So there you are, Stephen Fry, my fight with cancer. Of course, it wasn't a fight. I just submitted, and that the surgeon and the surgeon Ben was wonderful, and Roger, the urologist, was wonderful, and Tony, my doctor, wonderful. Generally felt my life was saved by this early intervention. So I would urge any of you men of a certain age to think about getting your PSA levels checked. And then, of course, it's all about discussing what the outcome, what the plan should be with your specialist and your doctor. I can't tell you how fortunate I am. Yes, I did go private. I'm insured. Insured over here too, and I don't think, in fact I know, because my surgeon works mostly for the National Health and does exactly the same procedure all the time for all kinds of men, because 1 in 8 men will get prostate cancer at some time in their life. It's overtaken breast cancer, as you may know, but which is not particularly important. It's not a rival match or anything. And it's 1 in 4 if you're of African descent. So that's the epidemiology of it. So it really is very likely that if you're a man, or not very likely, but there's a strong possibility that you will, you know, get it, and so it's worth checking your PSAs and then going from there. It isn't always necessary to have it out in the way I have. I'm not saying that's, of course, always the answer. The answer is to discuss these things with your doctor. That's it, really. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you for listening and watching. Yeah, just get yourself checked and follow your doctor's advice in all these matters. But otherwise, I'm lucky to be surrounded by such wonderful people, lucky to have had such an incredible team working with me and for me, and lucky, of course, to have an immune system, because that's the real hero of these things. It's the recovery, which is so phenomenal from an operation. And yeah, here's hoping anyway. Here's hoping I get another few years left on this planet, because I enjoy life at the moment, and that's a marvelous thing to be able to say, and I would rather it didn't go away. So, thanks again. This really is the end.